In this video, we're going to be talking about the in-page architecture, or that architecture that happens within an individual page. So what we've got here is the UW-Stout homepage, and it's common to most of us, and it's a pretty typical web page. So what I want to do is I want to start digging behind what you see in order to show you what's really there, because there is a difference between the structure and the presentation here, and the structure is a crucial aspect to understanding information architecture. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take away the presentation. So I am using Firefox at the moment, and I am using a web developer toolbar, and that allows me to disable all styles. By the way, this is a plugin for Firefox that you can get and use the tools that you see me using here. So I come in here, and you'll notice that it's a very different looking page, but if you look closely, everything that was on the page when the CSS was turned on is still in this page, only the page looks like an entirely different page. Here's the page again, here's the image of Stout, there's the various slideshows that are on there, coming events, latest news. Again, turn this off, and you'll find that it is the same content. The content has not changed, but what has happened when the style sheets are turned on is the CSS is allowed to do affect the presentation layer of this, and so it gets it gives the developer a much more interesting way of addressing putting the same content on the page, and that really is the beauty of CSS. But let's look a little bit further into this, because we are talking about information architecture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to choose to outline the block level elements. So these are elements that sort of get their own new line when it happens within a normal rendering of the page. So up here we've got our navigation. Again, it's a relatively extensive navigation here. You don't normally see most of that because of the rules that are applied in the rendering, and you see each of these boxes, and each of those represent a block level element that whenever the end of that comes and the new one begins, it always is going to bring it back over. And you'll see that these are nested, so that we've got a box here that contains the navigation, and inside that you've got the different navigation links. So by investigating this page, we're able to see that there is some kind of structure here. It's kind of hard to see what it is, but you can see that the structure's in there. There are a couple of different ways that you can investigate that structure. You can go in and you can view the source code, which will bring you essentially a text document that shows the code as it's written. And if you're real familiar with the web, then you can start looking at this and you can start interpreting what's in there. And so far, scrolling through here, what I'm seeing is a bunch of scripts. We're still not into the body section of the page yet. So there's thousands of lines of content here in the form of scripts and other stuff. And then we get into this mega banner area. So we've got the welcome index, and what you see here is your you've got a div of mega banner. Inside of that you've got another div, which is a box that it creates, and it's given that within that there's a unordered list with the role of navigation. So I know we're looking because this is and they're using semantic titles in here, I can tell that that's going to be the navigation. And when you get used to it, you can go through and look and see this kind of stuff. So you would be able to see what the structure is by looking at how it's actually coded. But there's other ways to do that as well. Every document uses what's called the document object model. The document object model is a visual representation of the structure of a page, treating each element as an object. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a document object model inspector, and what this does is it brings me to a place where I can visualize the structure of this. So we've got a document, and that's no big deal. It's an HTML type of document. And then when I go within the HTML, you'll see at the top there's some comments, and then there's the head section and the body section. And the head is where we saw all of those scripts and links and all that isn't visible to the person. And then of course there's the body, which is the portion of the web page that is visible to human beings. So I open that and I see that there's an anchor, and then there's a div in there, and that there's a couple scripts. But when I open this div, you'll see that there's another div inside of it, an outer wrapper, home page, and each of these, as you open them, it's showing a nested set of boxes, which are what are used to make up this page. And I maybe could have used a less complicated example, but when I come down to here, I get to the mega banner that we had talked about earlier, and we've got this div, which is the one that was holding the navigation, and then again you'll see more divs in there. So all of these are objects, document objects, that are put together in order to create a hierarchy or a structure within this page. So divs are one of the ways that we can introduce structure into a page. Another way that we can do that is through the use of headings. For instance, the H1, H2. As we move into, and I'm going to go ahead and close this, as we move into HTML5, then it gets even more semantic, meaning that instead of the header being a div with an ID of header, it goes more semantic, and they've started introducing more meaningful ways of creating these block elements. So in HTML5 you might use header instead of as the actual tag, instead of a div with an ID of header. And so we're moving towards more semantic markup, and we'll cover more of that as we go on. But this is what the page looks like when you're looking at it without the presentation, and we showed you the document object model, and all those things are there to demonstrate that there is a set of structure here to which you can apply rules, because it has been set up with the content separate from the presentation. Now what you do with that is up to the designer. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the CSS back on so we can get back to the way they had expected us to look at this. And you can still see that I've got those block level elements outlined. You can still see the boxes in here where the different blocks are. And I'm going to go ahead and turn that off too. And what I had done is just outline the block level elements. Okay, so now we're looking at the website, and what I want to do is I want to show you Stout's homepage, and then I want to show you some other home pages, because Stout uses an architecture that is a fixed width. So their presentation actually is based upon sort of a fixed width, where this is how big it's going to be. I want to contrast that with the University of Notre Dame, which uses a more current way of doing web design, which is responsive and fluid. So we have two websites here. We've already seen the Stout one. This one is a very visual website, especially at this side. You've got your navigation up here, you've got internal navigation here, and there's actually a great deal of content on this one page. So there's a lot of content and structure in this page. So at this size, you know, they're both reasonable websites, usable. But what I want to do is I want to show you why it's important to understand information architecture, and so that later you can understand how to manipulate that architecture without having to change the content, so that you can have entirely different presentations. Now when we move to this is tablet size in this browser window, and this is cell phone size in this one. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this and get it out of the way for now. So this is tablet size. This is the Stout home page, and it's still useful at this size. Everything is sort of there. Not a lot of scrolling. You might have to scroll left and right because the width of their content is just a little bit wider than the size that I've got the window. So it introduces navigation bars, scroll bars, in order to allow you to navigate through the content. Sometimes they'll go up and down. See, now in the case of Notre Dame, we don't have the left and right scroll bar. We've got an up and down scroll bar. So those are design features of the browsers that allow you to move through content when it doesn't all fit in. But what you'll notice here, and it's not immediately obvious though, is that there's been a change in the format that this content takes from when it was the full size. Again, the full size, it looks like it's using a similar image, but if we had more window, this is a very large image, and it is resizing itself to fit within that window. Whereas with the Stout homepage, this is all fixed with stuff. So while it gets narrower, the images don't resize. Okay, which is what brings us back to our this size. Again, Stout homepage sits there the same size as it always was. It doesn't respond to what we've asked it to do. University of Notre Dame has actually loaded a different image into this location. It's a smaller version of the same image, so it looks similar, but there's some things that start changing when you go through this. So now let's bring up the next size, which really makes it obvious the difference here. And I'm going to bring up the third size, which is the browser or the cell phone. Now, when you go to the Stout homepage, they actually redirect with a mobile phone. They redirect you to a different site. But if I'm looking at this site in the size of the screen that I would have if I were on, say, an iPhone, this is what I get, and I have to scroll left and right, up and down, even to see the main navigation points, and the content doesn't change. And this is where Notre Dame stands out. They've changed the presentation entirely from what was done in the tablet size and the screen size. And what this is doing is they haven't changed the HTML. So the architecture of this is the same, but the way that they've used it, because they have a strong architecture, and we have a strong architecture at the Stout site, but they've manipulated that in a different way that allows it to adapt for different screen sizes. And whereas ours, they've moved the navigation down here. For example, they've reduced the number of things. They give you a link to a menu that will bring additional items, whereas the Stout homepage is sort of, yeah, this is our page and you have to adapt to us. And so that's one of the things that we'll be covering in this class is how do you put the user at the center. And that's what's important about information architecture, or one of the things is that information architecture is designed at trying to help the users accomplish their goals. And it's looking at the user and the resources that the user has and what kind of way are they most likely to access it, and applying rules to help them satisfy and to be as flexible as possible to help them accomplish their goals. And so that's one of the key elements of information architecture. Is what we're trying to do is we are trying to help the user accomplish their goals, and in the process help the developers, or the people having the site develop, to accomplish their goals, whatever those goals would be, because they should be in parallel with the goals of the users. The people designing the site and the users should be trying to accomplish basically the same goal, which is, different depending upon the site that you're going to. So I'm sure one of the questions that you want is, what does this look like when you turn off the CSS, and what is it going to do as far as the document object model? So we'll just quickly look at that. I'm going to disable all the styles. I'm going to leave this at the cell phone style or size, and there is the content from Notre Dame. So now let's go ahead and go to the full size, or at least the size that will fit within the screen here. So we'll expand it out, and you notice nothing's changing because there aren't any style sheets active right now. We go back and outline the block level elements. Same kind of thing, you know, almost identical to the one that Stout has. And then when we go to the document object model, and I haven't looked at this, but we come into the HTML. We get the head, we'll go into the body. See, and here, this is what I was talking about, the semantic markup, and I figured that they would do it. Here they've got nav instead of div. Here they've got header instead of div. And then here they've got divs and footers. So within that nav, you're going to find your navigation stuff. That's new to HTML5. That wasn't in place with HTML4, the semantic markup in that way. So you've still got a containing div. They've got H1s and navs. H1 again is a semantic markup saying this is one of the most important parts of the page, H1, and then H2 is less important than H3. So you're able to build that architecture into the pages through the proper use of semantic HTML. And that sort of brings it all in. Here's your document object model. I can look at this one and see there's the header, there's the navigation, okay, here's divs, there's the footer, scripts, and by going to semantic markup, then you're able to use a cleaner and more meaningful kind of architecture, which can be picked up by search engines and by screen readers for blind people and all of those kinds of things. So that's the reason for information architecture, and we'll be learning a lot more about that as the semester goes on.